9 years ago, 3 young hikers walked into Shenandoah National Park and vanished. For nearly a decade, their families mourned them as lost forever, until 2-day hikers stumbled on an old concrete shelter deep in the forest. Inside lay a notebook that rewrote everything authorities thought they knew. What began as a weekend adventure turned into a psychological trap that none of them could escape. Before we dive into this chilling true story, tell us where you're watching from. And if you love mysteries that linger long after the credits roll, don't forget to subscribe. It all began in July of 2023, when 2 weekend hikers lost their way in the dense wilderness near Big Meadows, deep inside Shenandoah National Park, Virginia. As they tried to find their bearings, they stumbled upon something strange. An old concrete maintenance shelter almost a mile off any marked trail. Time had swallowed it whole. Thick vines and moss had nearly erased it from sight, its entrance half buried in the hillside like a relic from the Cold War era. When they stepped inside, they expected dust and decay, but instead, the air was fresh with the faint smell of propane and instant coffee. Modern sleeping bags lay neatly rolled beside a small camp stove. Food wrappers dated just months earlier littered the floor. And then there was the spiral notebook, its cover warped by moisture, its pages trembling in the wind. Inside were journal entries written in 3 distinct handwritings, spanning 9 years. The most recent entry, dated July 3rd, read, "Hikers getting closer. Need to move soon. Chris says we can't go back. I want to go home, but he's right. It's too late. How do you explain 9 years? Amber." Investigators would later confirm that the handwriting belonged to Amber Hayes, one of 3 college friends who had vanished without a trace on the Appalachian Trail back in June 2014. Alongside her were Tyler Morrison and Chris Park, all 22, recent graduates celebrating what was meant to be their last great adventure together. For nearly a decade, their families had mourned them as dead. But that notebook shattered everything, revealing a chilling truth. They hadn't died. They had survived, hidden, watching the world search for them while choosing to remain unseen. When rangers arrived 3 hours after the hikers' discovery, the shelter stood silent. The sleeping bags were gone, the stove cold, and the notebook left behind, as if the trio had melted back into the forest. Somewhere out there, 3 people who vanished at 22 were now 31, still trapped behind an invisible wall, not of stone or steel, but of fear, guilt, and the haunting weight of time. This is the story of how 3 days of bad decisions became 9 years of isolation, and how the wilderness can swallow more than bodies. It can swallow lives. Tyler Morrison, Amber Hayes, and Chris Park first met as freshmen at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. By senior year, they were inseparable, study partners, roommates, each other's chosen family. In the spring of 2014, as graduation loomed, they decided to take one last trip before adult life began. A week-long, 60-mile hike along the Appalachian Trail, cutting through Shenandoah National Park. They weren't reckless kids chasing danger. Tyler had grown up camping with his father, learning every trick to survive the outdoors. Amber had spent summers as a camp counselor, certified in wilderness first aid. And Chris, the planner, handled every detail, mapping routes, arranging food drops, and double-checking safety protocols. They were prepared, organized, and confident. On June 5, 2014, they arrived at the park's Thornton Gap Ranger Station, filled out their permits, and chatted with Ranger Linda Morrison, who would later recall them as cheerful, well-equipped, and professional. Their route was simple: enter at Thornton Gap, hike south along the Appalachian Trail, camp at designated shelters, and exit a week later at Swift Run Gap. They carried 7 days of food, phones loaded with offline maps, and a printed itinerary left with Tyler's parents. That first night, they stayed at Pass Mountain Hut. The logbook still bears Tyler's neat handwriting. Day 1, perfect weather. Epic week ahead. They even uploaded photos to Facebook. 3 friends laughing around a campfire, Amber captioning it, "Best friends, best trail, best week ever." No one knew it would be their last post. By the next morning, June 6th, everything changed. They never arrived at the next shelter, never signed another logbook. When they failed to exit at Swift Run Gap on June 12th, Chris's parents called the park rangers. The search began immediately. Frank Delqua, the park's seasoned search and rescue coordinator, led a textbook operation. Teams combed every mile between Pass Mountain and Swift Run Gap. Helicopters flew grid patterns using thermal imaging. Bloodhounds traced their scent from the trailhead. More than 200 volunteers joined the effort, but the forest gave nothing back. No tents, no gear, no trace of 3 young lives that had simply vanished. By June 20th, the search was scaled down. Officials concluded the trio must have fallen or been swept away in an accident somewhere deep in the wilderness. By August, families held memorial services. Tyler's younger brother quietly started college, carrying his grief in silence. Amber's parents sold their home, unable to bear the memories. And Chris's father, heartbroken and sleepless, suffered heart complications doctors linked to years of stress. No one could have imagined that, nearly a decade later, their children were still out there, alive, hiding just beyond the trails where their names had once been called through the trees. Every June 5th, like clockwork, the 3 families returned to Pass Mountain. They hiked the same trail their children had once taken, laid flowers near the shelter logbook, and stood together in the silence that only grief can make sacred. It was their ritual, a way to keep hope alive, even as years slipped quietly by. By 2020, the world had moved on. News coverage faded. The case had become another unsolved mystery buried beneath countless others. Yet one person refused to stop searching. Amber's younger sister, Ashley Hayes, still logged into missing persons databases every week. Even if she'd accepted she might never get answers, she couldn't bring herself to let go. Then came July 8th, 2023. Exactly 9 years and 1 month since the 3 friends had disappeared. David and Rachel Martinez, a married couple from Charlottesville, were day hiking through Shenandoah. Around 2 in the afternoon, they realized they'd taken a wrong turn somewhere along the Appalachian Trail. Instead of retracing their steps, they decided to cut straight through the brush, hoping to reconnect with the main path. The decision would lead them to something no one was ever meant to find. Nearly a mile off any marked trail, Rachel stopped suddenly. "David," she whispered, "do you see that?" Through a wall of thick undergrowth, she noticed something that didn't belong. Straight lines, the cold geometry of man-made structure cutting through the chaos of nature. As they pushed closer, they found it. A small concrete shelter built into the side of a hill, maybe 12 by 8 feet. Its roof covered in moss, its doorway almost devoured by vines. A forgotten relic, likely from the 1960s, or so they thought. David called out. But no one answered. They stepped inside cautiously. The air was cool and smelled faintly of smoke and damp earth. Then their eyes adjusted. 3 sleeping bags lay neatly on the concrete floor beside a small camp stove. Food supplies were stacked along the wall. Protein bars, dehydrated noodles, beef jerky, and water filters. Everything was tidy, lived in, and disturbingly recent. "Someone's here," Rachel whispered. "We should go." But before they turned to leave, David noticed a spiral notebook lying next to one of the sleeping bags. He picked it up. On the first page were 3 names written carefully in black ink. Tyler Morrison, Amber Hayes, Chris Park, dated June 6, 2014. David's pulse quickened as he flipped to the first entry, written in a man's bold handwriting. June 6, 2014. "We left the trail this morning to explore. Found this old shelter about a mile west of Pass Mountain. It's not on any map. We're staying here tonight instead of High Top, just for tonight. Chris wants to explore more tomorrow. We have plenty of food." Rachel leaned over his shoulder. "Is this real?" she whispered. David turned the pages. The entries continued, shifting between different handwriting styles, spanning years. Some dated as far back as 2014, others shockingly recent. Then on one page near the back, he froze. The last entry, written in a woman's delicate script, read, "July 3rd, 2023. 5 days ago. Hikers getting closer. Need to move soon. Chris says we can't go back. I want to go home, but he's right. It's too late. How do you explain 9 years? Amber." For a long moment, they just stood there, the forest pressing in around them. Then Rachel pulled out her phone, signal flickering between one bar and none. She called the park's emergency line, voice trembling as she explained what they'd found. A shelter off-trail, a journal possibly tied to the missing hikers from 2014. The dispatcher sounded skeptical, but sent a team anyway. It took nearly 3 hours for rangers to reach the site. When park ranger Sarah Chin arrived at 5:15, leading 3 others, she immediately recognized the names. She had been part of the original search 9 years earlier. As David handed her the notebook, Sarah went pale. She opened it, her hands shaking slightly. "This can't be real," she whispered. But everything in that shelter said otherwise. Her team documented every detail: photographs, videos, samples. The sleeping bags looked no older than 5 years. Food wrappers dated from 2022 and 2023. The camp stove was used but fully functional. Whoever had lived there had done so recently, and methodically. By 7 that evening, law enforcement teams had swarmed the area. Even Frank Delqua, the retired search coordinator who had led the original operation, returned to the site. Standing inside the small concrete room, his eyes welled with tears. "They were right here," he said softly. "All this time, less than 3 miles from where we searched." The notebook was carefully sealed and taken to park headquarters. Over the following week, forensic analysts from the FBI examined it. They compared each entry to known handwriting samples, old college applications, class notes, birthday cards. The results were conclusive. 3 distinct styles, 3 perfect matches. The journal was authentic, and what it revealed was unsettling. Not a story of abduction or tragedy, but of choice. The entries began innocently enough. June 6, 2014, their first night in the shelter, describing it as hidden and ours. June 7th, Tyler wrote about staying another night, calling the place amazing. June 8th, Amber's handwriting appeared for the first time. That was the moment the entries shifted, when curiosity began turning into something far darker. The next entries in the journal painted a haunting portrait of how fear can twist logic into a prison. June 9th, 2014. Tried to hike back to the Appalachian Trail, Tyler wrote, but got turned around in the forest. GPS isn't working right under the trees. We'll camp here tonight and try again tomorrow. Just another setback, nothing more. But what happened the next morning changed everything. Chris's handwriting took over. Found Skyline Drive this morning. Took us about 2 hours of bushwhacking, but we made it. We stood 20 feet from the road watching cars go by. Then we heard helicopters, search teams. We're only 4 days overdue, and they're already looking for us. Tyler wanted to flag down a car. I said we should think first. We've wasted resources, worried people. If we walk out now, we'll look like complete idiots. That single thought, fear of humiliation, was the first step into their psychological maze. June 10th, Tyler's tone was hesitant but compliant. Chris has a point. The search looks huge. Helicopters all day. We'll wait a few more days, let things calm down, then come out. They rationed food and convinced themselves that waiting was reasonable. But waiting soon became their way of life. By mid-June, the journal revealed the slow tightening of that trap. June 13th, Amber's words trembled with anxiety. It's been over a week. Helicopters still flying. Chris says we could get into legal trouble for causing all this. Is that true? I don't know. Tyler's nervous. Chris keeps saying just a little longer. 2 days later, Chris noted seeing search teams through binoculars. Close enough to hear them calling our names. They didn't answer. Better to wait until it's over, he wrote. Then we can slip out quietly and say we got lost. June 18th, Tyler again. Search is winding down. Heard on a ranger's radio they're moving to recovery mode. That means they think we're dead. Chris says that's actually good. Now we can wait a few months, come out with a survival story instead of looking like fools. But those few months never came. The final summer entries were heartbreaking. July 2nd, 2014. It's been almost a month. We can't go back now. My family thinks I'm dead. How do I show up after that? And 2 weeks later, Amber wrote, I want to go home. I miss my family, but it's too late. We've made our choice. August 1st, Chris's words carried a chilling calm. 1 month became 2. 2 became 3. We've learned to live here. We can forage, set snares, purify water. Maybe we can do this for a year. And they did. The entries from 2015 showed complete adaptation. Tyler describing how they insulated the shelter with moss, built storage for food, and survived the winter. This is our life now, he wrote that March daughter. On June 5th, exactly 1 year since they'd vanished, Amber wrote simply, I cried all day. Tyler and Chris don't talk about leaving anymore. I think we're all too afraid of what would happen if we did. By 2016, the tone had darkened. Amber confessed that Chris no longer allowed talk of returning. He says we'd be arrested. He says we've made our choice. Tyler agrees. I'm outvoted. What began as fear had become control. Chris's influence grew until it defined their reality. Then, in 2017, the moral decay began. We've started taking small supplies from campsites, one entry read. Food, batteries, clothes, only when no one's there. We're careful. Survival now carried a shadow. By the next year, thefts had become routine. The journal listed hidden supply caches, 3 separate spots within 2 miles of the shelter. What began as an innocent detour had turned into an unthinkable life sentence. 3 young hikers, trapped not by wilderness or danger, but by shame, fear, and one man's quiet domination. The final chapters of the journal, covering 2019 through 2022, revealed how 9 years of isolation had hollowed them out from the inside. Amber's entry from October 2020 read like a confession. I'm 30 now. I was 22 when we came here. I've spent my entire 20s hiding in the forest, because Chris convinced us we'd go to jail if we returned. Would we? I don't even know anymore. But it's too late to find out. Her handwriting, once steady and bright, had begun to tremble. The words carried the exhaustion of someone who had lived too long inside her own fear. By January of 2022, Tyler's tone was stripped of hope. A hiker saw me yesterday. I was checking a supply cache. He called out. I ran. He probably thinks I'm homeless. I used to have a job, a family, a life. Now I'm the person people are afraid of when they see me in the woods. It was the quiet self-awareness of a man who realized he had become a ghost. Then came the final spiral. Amber's entries from 2023 told a story of rebellion, guilt, and control. May, she wrote, I told Chris I want to leave, find a ranger, explain everything. He got angry, said if I leave, I'm on my own. Tyler doesn't take sides anymore. He's given up. Her June 15th entry broke hearts. I heard hikers talking nearby. They were so close I almost called out, but Chris was watching. 2 weeks later, June 28th. I've decided. When the opportunity comes, I'm leaving. I don't care what Chris says. I want my family back. I want a real life. The last words she ever wrote appeared on July 3rd. Hikers getting closer. Need to move soon. Chris says we can't go back. I want to go home, but he's right. It's too late. How do you explain 9 years? That was it. The end of the journal. The end of their trace. When the FBI finished analyzing the notebook, they confirmed its authenticity. But the truth it revealed was darker than any death. The 3 hikers had been alive all along, trapped not by force, but by shame and fear that grew into a psychological prison. The revelation shook the National Park Service to its core. Investigators scoured the site again and uncovered why no one had ever found them. The old concrete shelter was an engineering fluke, built into a hillside buried under decades of soil and thick vegetation. That layer of earth created a natural thermal barrier. When search helicopters equipped with FLIR imaging had flown overhead in 2014, the shelter's heat signature vanished into the background of the forest. They had been invisible. Inside, rangers found evidence of severe physical decline. Medical supplies, antibiotics, painkillers, even syringes, had been stolen from campers over the years. Amber's final entries mentioned constant pain, infected wounds, and broken teeth. Chris's handwriting in the later pages had grown erratic and uneven, leading experts to suspect neurological deterioration from malnutrition or infection. Forensic analysts concluded that by mid-2023, all 3 were likely in critical health. As the FBI and park rangers reviewed theft reports spanning nearly a decade, a pattern emerged. Small items missing from dozens of campsites. Batteries, food, bandages, clothing. For years, these were blamed on animals or opportunists. Only now did investigators realize it had been them all along, moving through the forest like phantoms, taking just enough to survive, always careful never to be seen twice in the same place. Once the truth came out, Shenandoah erupted into organized chaos. The park was locked down. Rangers cordoned off the shelter, and search teams returned with helicopters broadcasting messages through loudspeakers. Tyler, Amber, Chris, your families are waiting. You're not in trouble. Please come home. Ground teams spread out with dogs and thermal drones, surveillance cameras placed along trails they might use to travel at night. When the families were notified, the emotional toll was unimaginable. Patricia Morrison, Tyler's mother, collapsed upon hearing her son might still be alive. Amber's sister, Ashley, drove through the night to Shenandoah, demanding to see the journal for herself. Chris's parents, overwhelmed by guilt and disbelief, hired private investigators to search beyond park boundaries. The FBI classified the 3 as endangered adults voluntarily avoiding contact. a phrase that somehow made the tragedy even heavier. They weren't missing. They were hiding. Soon, witnesses began to surface. A trail maintenance worker recalled seeing 3 ragged figures in 2019 who vanished into the trees when he shouted. A couple reported food missing from their tent in 2021 while they slept. And in 2022, Ranger Marcus Webb admitted he had once spotted 3 people watching him from the tree line. Silent, unmoving, and gone the moment he blinked. For 9 years, they had lived just beyond reach, ghosts of the Appalachian wilderness, prisoners of their own fear, haunting the same forest that once promised them freedom. Each new report added another piece to the haunting puzzle. Witnesses described 3 figures who moved like whispers through the forest, vanishing the moment anyone drew near. Over 9 years, they had evolved into survivalists of almost mythical skill. Living ghosts who knew every ridge, stream, and shadow of Shenandoah. To understand what had kept them hidden for so long, investigators turned to psychology. Dr. Emily Rhodes, an expert in trauma and group dynamics, offered an unsettling explanation. This looks like a classic case of escalating commitment compounded by folie à trois. Shared delusional thinking among people with deep emotional bonds. They made one small bad choice in June 2014, staying an extra day to avoid embarrassment. That became 2 days, then a week, then forever. Each sunrise made turning back harder. Shame grows like roots, and with a strong, dominant leader, in this case, Chris, fear becomes a belief system. They weren't trapped by the wilderness. They were trapped by each other's minds. Despite Rangers' best efforts, the forest remained silent. Weeks passed with no sign of them, until July 28th. At 3:47 in the morning, a surveillance camera captured a single figure near the shelter. The infrared footage showed someone thin, wrapped in layered rags, standing motionless at the entrance for several minutes before melting back into the darkness. Based on height and build, analysts believed it might have been Amber, but no one could say for sure. She never returned. Desperate to reach her, Amber's sister Ashley left a handwritten letter pinned to the shelter wall. Amber, it's Ashley. Mom and Dad miss you. I miss you. You have a niece named after you. She's 4. Please come home. Nobody's angry. Nobody's going to prosecute you. We just want you back. We love you. Nothing else matters. The note remained untouched for weeks, fluttering in the mountain wind like a prayer no one could answer. Today, the case is still open. Tyler Morrison, Amber Hayes, and Chris Park are no longer officially listed as missing persons, but as endangered adults voluntarily evading contact. Legally, they've broken no serious laws. The small thefts over the years aren't enough for prosecution. That means authorities can't compel them to return. But their condition, after 9 years of isolation, malnutrition, and untreated illness, is a ticking tragedy. The families endure in their own ways. Tyler's mother, Patricia, moved to a cabin near Shenandoah. Every weekend she hikes the trails, leaving notes and small care packages at shelters. Ashley keeps a Facebook page alive, sharing updates, photos of Amber's niece, and open letters into the digital void. Chris's parents still fund private investigators to sweep the forest each month, clinging to fading hope. There are still sightings. A backpacker who saw 3 silhouettes moving through fog at dawn in September 2023. A ranger who discovered a fresh supply cache in October. Motion sensors that caught a blurred figure at 3 a.m. in November. Each clue reignites hope and heartbreak. Why didn't they come back? That question haunts every family member and every ranger who searched those woods. Dr. Rhodes believes the answer lies in the mind, not the map. After trauma, even self-inflicted trauma like shame, people can build an alternate reality where their decisions feel rational. Without outside voices, those beliefs calcify. Add years of isolation, and a dominant personality reinforcing the fear, and returning becomes psychologically impossible. The forest isn't their prison. Their minds are. And so the rangers keep watch. Cameras record, families wait. Somewhere out there in the heart of Shenandoah, 3 people who entered the forest at 22 are now 31. Still alive, still hiding. Perfectly aware of how close civilization is, yet unable to cross that invisible line between who they were and who they've become. They aren't lost. They know exactly where they are. They're just unable to return. The shelter remains, sealed off, monitored, surrounded by quiet. The journal rests in an FBI evidence vault, its pages now brittle with time. Every July 15th, the families gather at the site, The day the trio first admitted in writing that they couldn't go back. They leave food, photos, and letters that all carry the same message. We love you. You're not in trouble. It's not too late. And high above, the Blue Ridge Mountains stand silent, holding their secrets like sentinels. Somewhere, maybe watching from the tree line, 3 figures might still listen, trapped not by wilderness, but by 9 years of fear, love, and the one choice they never found the courage to undo. Somewhere in Shenandoah, 3 people who once dreamed of freedom now live as ghosts among the trees, close enough to see the world they left, but too afraid to step back into it. Their families still hike those same trails, leaving food, letters, and hope behind, praying that one day the forest will release its secret. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes that even the lost deserve to be found. And subscribe for more haunting true stories that remind us how fragile the line is between choice and disappearance.